Yeah, hi folks. Now in my last video, many commenters said that Sue Gray is doing a good thing by taking the government to court over the COVID vaccine. And she's right that the government has no right to force the vaccine on anyone. But equally, Sue has no right to take away people's choice to take the vaccine or not. And she's doing that by trying to halt the vaccine rollout. But folks, we have far more pressing issues than the vaccine at the moment. The war provocation coming from the CCP is far more important. And the Labour government is about to waste millions on the climate change hoax, while our hospitals are failing everyone, is far more important. And the full-on Maori separatism that the Labour government wants is definitely far more important. Now have a listen to Willie Jackson on the Puapua report.
With us now is Maori Development Minister Willie Jackson. Kia ora.
Morena, Susie.
Now, why not release this report in full? Why was that not done?
Because there's a big process to go through. Still, Susie, as you heard, we had our Treaty Minister Andrew Little saying he hasn't even read it yet. So I've got a big process to go through. I've got to circulate this with Cabinet, and then after that we have to lay down a strategy in terms of the public. We want the public buying into this. This is about future partnerships. This is about our what we're going to do in terms of the country, the future. What's the partnership like?
There never was a partnership.
Indigenous rights all about. So there's so much to do. It's not about just circulating a document, and then you start doing that, and then you get the irresponsible behaviour of National, which is clearly not the party of John Key anymore. National,
and we're thankful for that.
Who supported so many Maori issues like kohanga reo, treaty settlements process. It's unbelievable the type of issues they've supported, and they take everything out of context. We want to do this in an orderly manner and honour our obligations in terms of the United Nations, Susie.
Okay, we'll come on to that in a moment, but ACT Leader David Seymour saying that the report represents, quote, a significant and serious departure from the idea that all New Zealanders are equal.
And he's 100% correct there.
Is that fair?
No, he's talking absolute, total nonsense. And if you want to talk about the report, we've got to be very clear. We're talking about three areas here. We're talking about the United Nations Declaration. We're talking about which New Zealand has adopted. The National Party adopted it in 2010. We're talking about a plan that we've got to work on. And you're talking about He Puapua, the report. This is not a government report. This is an independent group who...
Yeah, and the author is Dr. Claire Winfield Ngā Mihi Charters, a UN hack from Auckland University. So let's see where she's coming from.
Claire, let me turn to you now. In sort of building off Angela's comments, let's talk specifically about self-determination, a concept that has garnered a lot of attention in the context of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Mm-hmm. And, sort of as Angela was just mentioning, the research in the United States is clear. Self-determination is not only the morally correct policy approach, but it also works to eradicate poverty and improve socioeconomic conditions among Indigenous peoples. So why is self-determination so controversial? And what can be done to help countries see the power and promise of Indigenous self-determination?
Thanks, Andrew, and thanks, Angela. So why is self-determination so problematic, and why? Wow, that's a big question, Andrew. But I think, and it's actually very difficult to answer on a global level, because I think each Indigenous people and each nation state has a different kind of dynamic, I think. But at heart, I think some of the reluctance to recognise Indigenous self-determination or something like sovereignty is because the nation state, the colonial state, or the sovereign state, as understood, is often threatened by it, of course, right? Because this might mean some sort of sharing of power or...
So sharing of power she wants. And that's the woman behind this so-called independent report.
Done some good work. We thank them for their work. But as the New Zealand Herald said this morning, there's not a report that has ever gone to government where you adopt every recommendation. And the New Zealand Herald is right. So this is an independent report, separate to government policy, separate to so many of the things that we want to do, but we thank them for what they've done, and congratulations to them for their work. But we have to be very clear, this is not government policy.
But to be fair, there have been lots of reports that have come out that have been commissioned by this Labour-led government.
Yes.
The information has then come out, it's been available for public scrutiny, and not all the recommendations have been adopted. So what makes this one so different? Because I guess that's where people do start to question why it is that this one hasn't been released.
Yeah, well, this is why, and hat tip to rather be fishing for this one. The report suggested a separate Maori parliament or upper house, separate court and justice systems, and Maori ownership of the foreshore and seabed, as well as recommendations on cultural rights and equity. A separate Maori parliament or upper house, separate court and justice systems, and Maori ownership of the foreshore and seabed. Now, folks, I hope this is resonating, because this is very, very dangerous stuff the Labour government is peddling. Anyway, folks, I'll post a link to this in the description below. Yeah, now, folks, I would say the Maori separatism we're seeing in New Zealand on a daily basis is the most urgent issue that we should be addressing in New Zealand today. And what do we hear from Sue Gray on this issue? Crickets.